Hey everyone, we're going to get started in a couple minutes. I'm going to give a couple more minutes for people to get on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chelsea Townsend, and I'm the director of the South Carolina Prescription Monitoring Program. And I also chair NASCSA's Education Committee. So I'll be hosting today's webinar along with NASCSA's Kathy Keogh. Today's webinar is actually going to be hosted by the PMIX Education Committee in conjunction with NASCSA. The webinar will be recorded and sent out electronically to membership. It will also be posted to the NASCSA YouTube channel. So our goal with this is that if you have new admins that are onboarding or new PMP staff, that you can refer them to this document or to this webinar to learn a little bit about PMIX. And then just a couple of NASCSA announcements. So travel scholarships for the NASCSA annual conference are posted. The deadline to apply is June 13th. Also, the next couple of NASCSA webinars were sent out via email today, so we encourage everyone to sign up for them. We have a couple of very good topics coming up, and so I think everyone will enjoy those topics that we sent out. So we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for today's webinar on the Prescription Monitoring Program eXchange, which is also known as PMIX Overview. This webinar will contain an overview of the history of PMIX, review the current organizational structure and opportunities for involvement, and give an overview of the current PMIX architecture and upcoming changes. Today, we have Jean Hall, chairman of the PMIX Architectural Subcommittee, to present on this topic. So please allow me to do a quick introduction of her. I know most of you guys know her, but Jean Hall is currently the program director for PDMP solutions at Logicoy, where she has been enrolled for the last 2 years. Prior to onboarding with Logicoy, Jean spent about 9.5 years with the Kentucky PDMP. Jean has worked in various roles in the healthcare technology field. Additionally, Jean has served various positions on the PMIX Executive Committee for the last 10 years, including her current role as member of the Executive Committee and the chair of the PMIX Technical Architecture Subcommittee. Jean has extensive experience in PDMPs and PDMP integration and workflow solutions. So welcome, Jean. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Chelsea. I'm just going to jump in here today and begin talking about the actual architecture. My goal is to give you a lot of information on what the architecture is about, but you can't do that kind of without talking about the history. The PMIX National Architecture is a framework that was designed to enable us to share data. Originally, it was between different prescription drug monitoring programs, and then evolved to be a tool used with other partners, such as EHRs and pharmacy systems. the PMIX National Architecture is actually governed by the PMIX Standards Organization. It started initially as just a committee that was sponsored by the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and evolved to creating its own bylaws and its own governance structure. It's currently headed by a 12-member executive committee. That 12-member executive committee is represented. There's 8 slots for state PDMP representatives, and there are 4 slots for vendors and other partners. And it is currently affiliated with NASCSA, and we thank Kathy for having us here today and for the support they've given to the PMIX Standards Organization. PMIX was first piloted in 2011. It actually was created before that, but the first pilots happened in 2011, and the first dates to be actually live in production began in 2012. Chad Garner, as many of you may know from the Ohio PDMP, actually wrote the very first implementation guide way back in 2010, 2011. And so we're indebted to Chad for the work he did back then, and we continue to have folks engaged today in reviewing and revising the architecture itself. So when PMIX was founded, there were a couple principles that we tried to adhere to. The use of free, open, and consensus-based standards. What's that mean? This is not a standard that you have to pay for. You don't have to have a membership to the organization. You don't have to pay an organization a fee to use it. It's an open standard. It's based on what the folks who are the stakeholders who are engaged in using the standards feel needs to be there. And it's also based on the National Information Exchange model, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. The principle that brought us together, so we wanted this common format of our data sharing. We wanted to create something that, you know, we might call it, one PDMP might call something a particular thing in their system, or they might choose to display different things, but it was a way for us to decide that here's how we can exchange the elements of data that we want, and it's a common format, so that, you know, you didn't have to build a format for everybody you were exchanging information with. It creates a data list, a list of elements. It has a format that is used consistently so that everybody knows what to expect when they get a certain type of communication from the other system. They know what format that communication is going to be in and how to read it and interpret it and use it. We also wanted to be sure that there were security and privacy protocols to protect that sensitive information from one point to the other and back again. And then again, it was designed to, the idea was that the states would decide what this architecture would be like and what information they would share and how they would share it. Not anybody outside of the state PDMPs. So my goal today is to help you understand the architecture. And there's a couple of things that you need to understand to get to the point of understanding how the architecture works. So I said it was based on the National Information Exchange model. NIM is a standard structure that is used by most federal agencies in all 50 states to exchange data or information. When I'm talking about data, it's really the information we have to share. It utilizes what's called an XML-based information exchange. I gave you right here just a little clue in case you play trivia some night and some techie has written the trivia questions and asks what XML stands for. It's extensible markup language. But that's just the framework. So we have these common data elements, and then there's this framework that those 8 elements fit into so that both entities involved in exchange, or all the entities involved in exchange, will understand what's being exchanged. XML is a language that is really text-based. In the past, and in some other types of data exchange, it's really difficult to understand the data because it might have been pipe delimited or different delimiters between various fields of data. And with XML, and you've probably seen that to some degree in ASAP. With XML, it's a very readable data exchange format. And when I get to some of the schemas as we get further on into the presentation, you will see that you can see what the computer sees, and you can read what the computer systems are reading. So what are the data elements? Well, there's a combination of things we use in these data elements. There are data elements that we take from the NEAM catalog, because that's one of the benefits of being a NEAM-based standard. There's a huge catalog of data elements, and those data elements are defined. For example, there are definitions around a telephone number. Must have this many digits. It can't exceed that many digits. You know, it's all numeric and so on. So NEAM defines all that. And the advantage to us to using NEAM is that we don't have to define that. When we say that this is a NEAM field, which is designated by NC in the schema, any developer who's working with that field will know that that's from the NEAM catalog, and they can see how that field is defined by looking at the catalog of NEAM elements. And then we have the ability with NEAM, which is different than some other standards, to add additional fields that are specific to PDMP. So we're not constrained to only what's in their catalog, but we're actually have the opportunity to create fields that are only used by us and never become a part of the NEAM catalog. And those are designated by PMP in the schemas. So there's a little, you'll see it later. You can actually see this is a PMP field, this is a NEAM field. And basically we started with the data that's used by pharmacies to submit prescription records, and then we build upon that to create these schemas that are used for exchanging data. So what do you need to understand about PMIX? If we finish today and you understand these three things, I think we'll be successful. How does the data get from what pharmacies are submitting to us in ASAP to what PMIX uses and exchanges? What is an XML schema, and what is metadata? So I'm going to just jump right in. As I said previously, we're basically using this catalog of NEAM to take the fields that are in prescription records, because that's a key part of what we're trying to exchange, to take those ASAP fields and map them to NEAM catalog fields. Where we can't, we create the PMP fields. So NEAM has definitions for a first name and a last name, and we use all those fields. What we may call it first name in ASAP, in NEAM, it would be called given name. And we map those across. And actually for the developers in the back end of what we create to do that is a definition of those mappings. This is this ASAP field, and is where this data would come from. So how does it work all together when Kentucky wants to share information with Ohio? Was not very different than the concept of snail mail. You know, when we used to go and put a letter in the mailbox, and we send it off to our family across the country, and they would write a letter back and send it back to us. It's really kind of the same concepts. Or when a company would send an invoice or an order form from one company to another. We use these things, these schemas. They're the structure of the data. So they define what element goes where, and they become kind of the document or the form. And different schemas are used for different parts of the information exchange. We have request schemas, we have response schemas. There's parts of the schema that acknowledge the status, and there's metadata schemas. So what's metadata? Metadata is basically the information that tells the system what they're getting, what to do with it. It It can have information about the content. You can have routing information. It's the information that all the partners, all the systems see and use to do their part of the process. So it's kind of the wraparound data. Metadata kind of wraps around what you're doing so that the different systems know what they're getting and what they need to do with it. So let's go back to our snail mail concept. So the schema is the form. So here we have an expense report. It could be an order form. In the old snail mail world, it was a piece of paper and there was certain information put in different fields. And, in a lot of respects, everybody who has ever done an expense report on paper, they all look the same. Some of them will look little different headers, a little different twist. But the data elements are usually basically the same. The format is largely the same to accomplish the same objectives, the same for like order forms or invoices. And so that form, all those data elements are on that form, and that form itself becomes the schema. So these are the NEAM and the PMP data elements. They are the pieces that are compose the form. And then the format is the schemas. If you think about that, and when we're in snail mail, we're sending that invoice or that order form over to somebody. We then put that inside because nobody other than the person we were sending it to needed to see it. But we had to put on the outside of that envelope the information about where it should go and who it came from. Typically, my little image here doesn't have it, but typically, you put your return address. You put the stamp that, enabled it to pass from one place to another, and then you put the address to where it's going. The concept is basically kind of the same. You have your original item that's over here. It's put in an envelope, sealed up, so it's secure. The system itself, receives that information or takes that information and routes it to the post office, which we would call the hubs in our world. And then from there, it's routed to the receiver, which would be, if this was a request from one state, this is the request this is the state that they intended to send that to. And then the same going back. So what is the metadata? How does the metadata work? I said that it's telling you who is doing the asking, from whom they are requesting the information, the kind of thing that needs to be known in order to exchange the information. So you have a provider, and whether they're in the state PDMP system, we're going to assume they're in the state PDMP system today. If they were integrated, it might be another hop, or two in here, but the principles are all the same. So if you're a provider, and what we know about that provider is who they are, what state they're from, who they want data from, and what their role is. And then the system that the request is coming from usually has identification numbers. And so that provider sends their little envelope over here to the hub, and the hub can read that very same information. And they know that this provider in Kentucky who is requesting data from Ohio is a physician or an advanced practice RN or a nurse practitioner. And they're going to basically take that metadata information, and they're going to say, okay, well, does Ohio allow queries from this state, Kentucky? Do they allow it from this type requester role? If the answer is yes, then they forward it on. So that then the other state PDMP system can obviously read that same information to say, oh, okay, I have a request from John Smith in Kentucky to me in Ohio. He's a physician, and I'm going to process that request. So remember earlier when I said that the metadata is readable by human eyes. This is the beginning of the metadata schema. This is just the basic one. We have two, basic and comprehensive, I think is the name of the other one, or enhanced. And you can see in a basic metadata schema, it just says, requester John Doe, fills the role of a physician. He's from New York, and he's from Massachusetts. Very readable. This is the enhanced metadata schema. This one offers a whole lot more opportunity for information exchange. When it was originally designed, it was designed in order to support integration, where we might want to know more about the requester and what organization they came from and so on. So in the enhanced metadata schema, there's additional fields like you can actually identify the provider by an NPI, a state license number, a DEA, or if a state PDMP wanted to use something else, they can actually use other and define identifiers for their partners if they would care to. You can know where the requester's organization is, and you can even go to the level of knowing what facility within that organization, and that they too can be identified by things like a DEA or an NPI or a state license or other. The metadata also has a spot for when the response is returned from the other entity, the other state, or states. In this case, this is one where the hub compiled multiple responses from multiple states, and it will identify what the response was from each state. New Jersey was complete. That means that New Jersey had data to provide. New York had no data, and Kentucky doesn't allow that role access to their information, so it was disallowed. And then finally, there's also data in the enhanced metadata where organizations can share their unique identifiers for each transaction. This is really helpful to the people who support this technology, because if there's a problem transferring information to and from, this information is often in log files, and it can be used to search for a particular record and find more detail about what may have happened in that data transfer. Finally, there's a place for hub identification numbers as well, and a hub identification code. So it can say here ArcCheck or PMPI. So this allows you state PDMPs to record a lot of information about the transaction themselves in case they need to troubleshoot that transaction in the future. So then you have the request schemas, and they tell you who is making the request, what period of time they want, what patient they want. So in the request schema, you'll find things like the patient name, their demographics, their identification if a state uses one, and the request date range. Again, that request is sent over to the hub. The hub determines whether that request, it has already determined from the metadata that that request has come over and can now be sent on. The important thing to note about this is that the hub can't see this piece. The only place that this can be opened is at either end. So the hub sees that routing information that we talked about just a few minutes ago, but they don't see the patient name or the demographics or those kind of things. That is only open on either end. So we have a basic request schema and a comprehensive request schema. The basic request schema is basically first name, last name, date of birth. The comprehensive request schema, which I have shared here, has the opportunity to share more information. And again, it's very readable. You can see all of this information. Anything that's indented under one piece is actually a component of that section of the schema. So this is the request patient section. And so this is the patient identifiable information. And under that, you can see we have birthday, name, sex or gender. You can have identification numbers, like in Kentucky, they use social security number. If there was some other identification you wanted to share, there's additional information like under the person primary contact level, there's phone numbers, street address, city, state. And there's also the ability to actually identify if there is a state-specific identifier, what that information is. And then there's additional information like species, location code, patient name can be exchanged if you choose to. I haven't seen this information actually populated in any schemas, but the opportunity is there now today. Once that goes over, that request goes over and is processed, there's a different schema used to return the response. And they tell you who the patient, who the prescription records are about, what were they for, when were they dispensed, those kind of things. Again, the hub reads the metadata, but they cannot see the data, the prescription record data. And they use that metadata to route it back to the requesting state, who can then open the content. So that schema is called the Prescription Report PMP Exchange schema. I don't know who named that years ago, but this is the schema that returns the data. And you can see at the beginning of the schema, there's some things related back, like the date range that was in the request is then populated as the report date range. There's information to identify the dispenser, the things like the prescription fill and written dates, the drug information, including the NDC, refills authorized, dispense quantities, drug dosage units, method of payments, transmission form of origin. You could do those, prescribed quantity, the ICD-10s there, sold date. And these are the current schemas that are available today. We are working on some new schemas, and I'm going to show you in a minute the other information that is being added to the new schemas. So that's basically the information exchange piece, but that's not the only piece of the PMIX. That's not the only components of the PMIX architecture. There have been other components adopted over the years. In, I think it was 2018, we adopted a security standard, a way to measure security. It is similar to all those security standards you see out there, like or all those standards you see out there like SOC 2, ISO 2701, those kind of things. It is based on another national standard instead of inventing our own. It's based on the National Institute of Standards and Technology. If you know, the HIPAA standards are based on NIST. Many standards out there are based on NIST. And again, this is also a catalog of things that you can use to measure security. And what folks do is they pick a subset of those data elements, often for their own individual standards. So HIPAA might identify certain things. Other types of business might identify other elements that are important to them. I did include, Kathy, if we can send out this PowerPoint, it did include a hyperlink to the PMIX security standard that's out there. The PMIX security standard, we decided not to reinvent the wheel, but look to already existing NIST standards to see if any of them suited our needs within NIST. And we picked NIST 800-171, which is called Protecting Controlled Unclassified Information in Non-Federal Systems and Organizations. It's largely like some of the HIPAA standards. And the reason we picked it is that we didn't have to maintain it either. As things evolve and change and NIST changes this standard, we can just review the standard and determine whether it still fits our need. To date, it hasn't evolved a huge amount, and everything that throughout its evolution has basically remained appropriate for PDMP data in exchange. I think they're on revision 3 or 4, and when we first adopted it was revision 1. So it's a way, it's out there. If you're all, it's something you can use as a tool. If you're curious about what things are important, you can go out and look at that standard and see what was defined as important to PDMPs about the exchange of their information. It also, I think, in a lot of ways, can help you with even your own technical people if you go and review the components and of what we felt was important about the security of this information exchange. We defined the roles. I think that was back in probably 2017. We defined the roles for data exchange. The documentation of those roles is also in a hyperlink here. And I think that the Operations Committee is reviewing these right now to see if there's any additional roles that we might need. We defined the status messages. This is what the state should be sending back and forth. Complete means that data is available in return for a person that matches the requested patient based on the information provided in the request. No data, disallowed, error, and deferred are also available. These first 5 right here are used by the PDMP. This 6th one is meant for the hubs only. If the hubs are doing a transition and they get to the point where they're going to discontinue a version, they can use this version mismatch to tell someone who is not using the correct version that they are no longer using the supported version of the hub. We also defined alerts, and that resulted, if you all ever go into your PMP Interconnect or ArcCheck Hub consoles, you can see a place where you can set alerts to tell other PDMPs or for the hub to tell PDMPs that they are either performing maintenance. The alerts are basically, there's 2 types of hub maintenance and a PDMP maintenance. If you're not aware of this, these can be set. So, and when they're set, the hub knows that a particular PDMP is in a maintenance mode. And so if a request comes to that PDMP, they don't wait for it to time out. They know it's not going to be responded to. And so if the PDMP sets that maintenance mode, they can go ahead and respond that that PDMP is in maintenance so that the other system is not waiting for that PDMP to respond since they are not up and actively processing transactions. There's also some notifications that we asked for, error notifications from PDMPs or the hub itself. If the hub is seeing high levels of errors, they would send notifications out and timeout notifications. So you may see some of these today. Prior to these being defined, they really wasn't, those communications weren't going out. So to just go back to where we started, PMIX architecture was designed so that we don't have to call things the same thing in order to agree how we share that data. We don't even always have to agree to share all the data. There are only certain elements that are required in those exchange. In the requests, first name, last name, and date of birth are the only required fields. So if you choose to just use those, you can. If you're a state that wants to use more of those, whether it's with their interstate partners or their integrated partners, they can choose to use more of those fields. So it gives a framework for what has to be exchanged and what can be exchanged. It defines a common format so that everybody is sending the same type of information in the same way. Makes it much easier on the developer type people in the world. They know what to look for, what to expect, what it's called, and then they can use that, helps them guide them to how they use it. I think we just went over the security, so you understand the importance of that. So we are in the process of taking ASAP 5.0 and converting that into PMIX 4.0, I believe, or 5. And these are the fields that we're working on adding to the schemas. I'm just going to pause here a second so you have a moment to look at them. You'll see on the right-hand side, I said fields cross-referenced to ASAP. When we actually opened up the schema and began to work with it, we noticed that there is information within the schema files that directs developers how to use this in a technology system. And we noticed that a number of the fields weren't actually cross-referenced to the ASAP field that they were coming from. And I think for the most part, everybody knew what they were. But for it to be a really complete and high quality standard in schema, we should have that there. So in addition to the new fields we are adding, we have gone back now and are improving the files so that they are cross-referenced to ASAP. So there's no doubt about which field would actually fill this field. Where we're at is I'm hoping we're close to completion with the technical files. It's actually a pretty massive undertaking to do these, and we've been doing it with volunteer resources. So there are folks who are technology people, are developers, but they're doing it kind of in addition to all their work responsibilities. We thought we had it finished, and we did. After we have it finished, there's a way that you can use a tool to create samples. And when we created the samples, we realized that there was some missing components or some components that needed to be fine-tuned. And so we're at that stage where we're adding those missing components in and fine-tuning the tool so that it can be used effectively. And then from there, we'll create samples. When we did the last upgrade to it, we didn't really create a guide on how to use it or update a guide. And we hope to do that this time, is to create additional documentation outside of the documentation that the developers use, so that there's kind of a wraparound documentation for the other people involved in the use of these to understand the standard and how it's used. Once we get that stuff together, we say that we'll be reviewing there'll be a review by the vendors. Most of the vendors are actually involved in this process, and it's their volunteer team members that are doing the work. And so we're kind of reviewing as it goes along. There might be one vendor that hasn't been actively involved, and we'll probably reach out and just give them an opportunity to look at it so that we don't they're not surprised by it, or they have an opportunity to give us feedback. And then they'll be presented to the Technical Architecture Committee. Once the Technical Architecture Committee is satisfied with them, then they will vote to move them on to the Executive Committee. And the Executive Committee has a whole process. I decided not to go into it in detail today, but it is out on the NASCSA website and it'll tell you how it is how the final architecture change approved. They do require it to be posted and to be voted on by the states. So the states will have an opportunity to then see them all and vote on them. So at the beginning, I made reference to that XML and what it stood for. And so I thought I could finish up real quick here, Kathy, with 4 trivia questions, and people can post in the chat to see what they learned from the presentation today. And the first one is, what does XML stand for? So anybody who has an idea, if you want to post in the chat what XML stands for. Did everybody forget?
No, maybe next time we'll do a poll.
Okay. My next one, just because Chad will kill me when he hears I said this. Who's the godfather of, and I gave it away. Who's the godfather of PMIX, Chelsea?
It's Chad.
Chad Garner.
Yeah. And the Q&A is open. So if you guys, nobody else will be able to see your answer, but you can always type your answer in the Q&A or any other questions that you have for Jean to answer at the end of this.
Yeah, please, yeah, bring on the questions if you have them. What part is the form? Do you remember that it was the schemas? And what part is the envelope? That's metadata.
Jacqueline got schemas right.
All right. So we'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions?
While people are thinking of questions, if there are any, again, I just want to remind everybody that we will post this webinar. All of our PMIX education topics, we're planning to record them and post them. That way they're available to view in the future. If you just need a refresher, if you're onboarding new staff, we want this information to be available. That way you can learn about it in the interim of webinars coming out. Debbie from Tennessee asked, did the most recent revisions by ASAP to the AIR 06, I think that is the field, change any work on the schema?
Did ASAP send out a revision to AIR 06? I didn't see that, but
I haven't seen one.
We've been kind of holding, Debbie, because we have been trying to get it. I think it's 6 and 20 something, the one that they reused an old code. We have been trying to get that updated so that we could actually put those codes in the way that most PDMPs would like to see them be. I don't know, Debbie, I'll reach out and see if they did make that change. I'll reach out to Bill.
So
Chelsea, I'll probably put you on that too, because I think you were on my other request when we asked for it to be changed.
Yeah.
So Debbie actually commented, I heard they did, and that it can be requested if you bought ASAP documentation.
Okay. Well,
we will reach out. Yeah, because
Yeah.
we sent an email requesting a change. This was quite a few months ago, and we were told that there would be no revisions to that field. So we will reach out to Bill and see if there are revisions, and if so, we'll take that to the group that is working on the schemas.
Yep. They'll be happy to hear that. They keep asking about it. Have we gotten it changed?
Yeah. That would be amazing. A lot of people would be happy about that. Okay, well, I do not see any other questions. Again, there's one more. It says there is no difference between the metadata for PMPI versus RxCheck, question mark.
There is. There is some difference in the metadata between PMPI and RxCheck. There's no difference in the requests and responses, but there is some difference in the metadata.
Do you know what the differences are in the metadata for that?
I'd have to go back and do a comparison, Chelsea, but we could put that as maybe something that the Technical Architecture Committee would do, is compare the two.
Perfect. And then Debbie said that she heard from Bamboo on a call that they said recently that there was an update to that AIR field. So
Perfect.
perfect. Let me make sure nothing else has come through. Okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and close out this call. I want to thank you, Jean, for doing this for us. You are a wealth of knowledge. I feel like I am always coming to you with questions. So we really, really, really appreciate you. Thank you, Kathy, for letting us host this with NASCSA. We appreciate that. And then thank you, everybody, for attending today. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. But we appreciate you attending this educational topic. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, Chelsea. And if anybody ever has questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help. If you're confused by something related to PMIX or have a question, don't hesitate to reach out. And thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.